Emma Lewis lived a quiet, predictable life in a small house just outside Portland. She was 42, graceful, kind, and had learned to find peace in solitude after her divorce 5 years ago. Her home was warm and filled with the scent of coffee and vanilla candles. To her neighbors, she was the elegant woman who smiled politely but never shared much. Inside, however, Emma often felt like a shadow of the woman she once was. She had spent so many years being careful with her words, her feelings, and especially her dreams. That Saturday, sunlight poured through her window as she stood before the mirror, trying on outfits for her friend Lily's engagement party. She hadn't attended a social event in months. Most of her days were spent working from home, reading, and walking her dog, Jasper. But Lily had insisted she come, saying, "You need to live a little again, Em." Emma smiled at the thought. She pulled out a cream-colored blouse and paired it with a navy blue miniskirt, a piece she hadn't worn in years. It had been buried in the back of her closet, a memory from a time when she felt confident and playful. She hesitated, holding it up against herself. "Maybe I'm too old for this," she murmured, half laughing. But something inside her whispered otherwise. She wanted to feel alive again, even just for one evening. She slipped into the skirt, adjusted her blouse, and looked in the mirror. To her surprise, she liked what she saw. It wasn't about being young. It was about feeling like herself again. She added light makeup, curled her hair, and for the first time in a long while, smiled at her reflection. Just as she reached for her purse, the doorbell rang. She frowned, glancing at the clock. It was early afternoon. No one ever visited her without notice. She walked to the door, heels clicking softly on the wooden floor, and opened it. Standing there was Ryan, her nephew. "Ryan?" she said, blinking in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Ryan, 24, tall and charming, gave her a sheepish grin. He was holding a coffee cup in one hand and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Hey, Aunt Emma. I didn't mean to just drop by. My internship in Portland got extended, and my apartment lease ended. I was hoping I could stay here for a few days while I figured things out." Emma stared for a moment, surprised but touched. Ryan had always been her favorite nephew. He used to visit her every summer when he was younger, spending hours helping her in the garden or baking cookies in her kitchen. He was like the son she never had. "Of course, sweetheart," she said warmly, stepping aside. "Come in." "You don't have to ask," he smiled, walking past her, but then paused slightly, noticing her outfit. His eyes widened for just a second. Then he quickly looked away, clearing his throat. "Wow, you look different. You going somewhere?" Emma laughed softly, slightly self-conscious. "I have a friend's engagement party tonight. I wasn't sure about the outfits. Been a while since I wore something like this." Ryan gave a small nod, smiling. "You look great, Aunt Emma. Really, you should wear what makes you happy." The words caught her off guard. So simple, yet so genuine. She felt an unexpected warmth rise to her cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's nice of you to say that." She helped him settle in, showing him to the guest room down the hall. Ryan placed his bag on the bed and looked around. "Feels weird being back here," he said, smiling. "I remember sleeping in this room when I was a kid." Emma smiled too. "And eating all my cookies." He laughed. Some things never change. As she left him to unpack, Emma found herself smiling more than she had in weeks. It was comforting having someone else in the house, again the sound of movement, of life. She had grown so used to quiet evenings that even a few footsteps in the hallway felt strange and wonderful. Later that afternoon, as she got ready to leave, Ryan was sitting in the living room, flipping through an old photo album he'd found on the shelf. "You look so happy here," he said, pointing at a photo of her from 10 years ago. Emma leaned over and laughed. "That was before I learned what heartbreak feels like." Ryan looked up, his tone soft. "You're still that person, you know. You just forgot for a while." His words made her heart ache a little. She didn't know why they affected her so deeply, maybe because they came from someone who still saw her as more than the quiet woman everyone else did. She grabbed her purse and keys. "You always did have a way with words, Ryan." "Maybe I got that from you," he said with a grin. As she walked to her car, she turned back and saw him waving from the doorway. There was something comforting in the sight. His presence reminded her of family, warmth, and all the things she'd been missing without realizing it. On the drive to the party, her mind wandered. She thought about how fast time had gone by, how Ryan had grown from a curious boy into a kind, thoughtful man. She also thought about her own life, how she'd built walls around her heart after her marriage ended, how she'd chosen safety over emotion. But today, just for a moment, wearing that skirt and hearing Ryan's kind words, she'd felt something different, like a spark flickering in the quiet. At the engagement party, Emma smiled and mingled, but her thoughts drifted back home more than once. She wondered if Ryan was settling in, if he'd eaten, if the house felt warm enough. She couldn't explain it, but his sudden visit had stirred something gentle inside her, feelings she hadn't expected. By the time she returned home that night, the house was dim except for the soft glow of a lamp in the living room. Ryan was still awake, reading on the couch. "You're up?" she asked with a tired smile. He looked up. "Couldn't sleep. Your couch is too comfortable." She laughed. "That's a new complaint." They talked briefly about her party, his internship, little things that made the silence easy. And as Emma went to her room that night, she felt strangely at peace. It had been a long time since her home felt alive, since she felt seen. When she turned off the lights, a quiet smile lingered on her face. She didn't yet know how deeply Ryan's visit would change her, how it would awaken memories, emotions, and the courage to see herself differently. But that night, all she knew was this. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. And that feeling alone was enough to begin everything that followed. When Emma returned from the party that night, the sky was dark and quiet, and the streetlights glowed softly over the road. She felt both tired and strangely alive. The evening had gone well, her friends had complimented her outfit, and for once, she had laughed freely. Yet something kept pulling her thoughts back home, to the unexpected guest waiting there as she parked her car and stepped inside. She found Ryan still awake, sitting on the couch with a blanket over his lap and a cup of tea beside him. The television played a quiet late-night show, but he wasn't really watching. He looked up when she entered, smiling gently. "Hey, Aunt Emma, you're back early." She hung up her coat and slipped off her heels, sighing. "I think I've forgotten how to stay up late," she said. Half-dashed joking, Ryan chuckled. "You look like you had fun, though." Emma smiled faintly, brushing a curl behind her ear. "It was nice. Everyone was happy. But I guess I realized something tonight. Not very good at pretending anymore." Ryan frowned slightly. "Pretending." She sank into the armchair across from him. "Pretending to be okay, pretending that I don't miss having someone to talk to at the end of the day. I've built a comfortable life, but sometimes it feels too quiet." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. When I first moved out on my own, I thought being independent would feel amazing. But sometimes it just feels empty." Their words filled the space between them, gentle but honest. It wasn't a heavy silence, it was comforting. Like they both understood something without needing to explain. Emma tilted her head. "You've grown up, Ryan. I still remember the summer you got your first job and came home complaining about your boss." He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I was dramatic. You always listened, though. You were the only adult who didn't tell me to just deal with it." Emma smiled softly. "Maybe because I knew what it felt like not to be heard." For a long moment, they just sat there, the sound of the ticking clock filling the quiet. Emma looked at him looked tanned, noticed how much he had changed. The boy she once knew had become a man calm, mature and thoughtful. His eyes still held that same warmth, the same spark of kindness, but there was something deeper now. Something that made her heart ache in an unfamiliar way. Ryan leaned forward, his tone gentle. "You know, Aunt Emma, you don't have to keep things bottled up. You've done so much for everyone else. Maybe it's time you do something for yourself." She gave a quiet laugh. "Easier said than done. I'm serious," he said. "You've always been strong. But strength doesn't mean hiding from happiness." His words caught her off guard. She stared at him, unsure what to say. It wasn't the kind of encouragement she expected from him. It felt deeper, more personal, like he was seeing through the walls she'd built around herself. For a moment, she felt her eyes sting with unshed tears. She quickly looked away, pretending to adjust her bracelet. "You sound wiser than your age," Ryan smiled softly. "Maybe I learned it from you." The clock struck midnight, and Emma realized how long they'd been talking. Time had slipped away so naturally. She hadn't had a conversation like this in years, one that didn't feel forced or rushed, one that reminded her she was still human, still capable of connection. As she stood to head to bed, Ryan looked up. "Hey, Aunt Emma." She turned back. "Yes." He hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "You deserve to be happy again. Don't forget that." The words lingered in the air, warm and sincere. Emma smiled faintly, but her heart ached. "Good night, Ryan," she whispered. "Good night," he said, watching her go. In her room, Emma changed into her nightgown and sat by the window, staring at the moonlight spreading across the trees. His words echoed in her mind, circling again and again. "You deserve to be happy again." When was the last time someone said that to her? When was the last time she believed it? She looked at her reflection in the window, the faint lines around her eyes, the touch of silver in her hair. For years, she had convinced herself that her best days were behind her. But tonight, she felt something stir quietly inside her. A flicker of warmth, of hope, of possibility. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. Emma woke early, made coffee, and set the table for two. She hadn't done that in years either. Ryan joined her soon after, hair still messy from sleep. "Morning," he said, smiling. "Morning," she replied, pouring him a cup. "Sleep well." "Like a rock," he said, yawning. Then he looked at her. "You seem happier today." "Maybe I am," she said softly. "Or maybe I'm just trying to be," he smiled, leaning against the counter. "That's a start." They ate breakfast together, talking about simple things, work, movies, memories from years ago. But beneath the conversation was a quiet warmth that neither could quite explain. For Emma, it wasn't romantic. It was something deeper, an emotional connection she hadn't felt in a long time. Something pure and grounding. When Ryan left that morning to meet a friend, Emma stayed behind, tidying the house, humming softly to herself. The walls didn't feel so empty anymore. There was laughter again, and that laughter made her realize how long she had gone without it. Later that day, as she folded laundry, she found one of Ryan's shirts in the pile. She held it for a moment, smiling at the memory of him sitting on the couch last night, talking with that same boyish charm she'd always adored. It wasn't love in the romantic sense, it was something different. A rediscovery of affection, of care, of family ties that had faded in the background of busy lives. Ryan had unknowingly reminded her that her heart could still feel warmth, still open, still heal. When evening came, she sat by the fireplace with a book, but she couldn't focus on the words. Her thoughts wandered to Ryan's advice, to stop hiding, to let herself live again. Maybe it was time to change something. As she closed the book and looked into the flickering light, a small smile touched her lips. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like time was passing her by. That night, she slept peacefully, unaware that her quiet decision to live a little again would soon lead her into moments she never expected, moments that would test her emotions, challenge her comfort, and ultimately change how she saw herself forever. And it had all begun with one unexpected conversation late at night, with a nephew who simply reminded her that happiness wasn't lost, it was waiting to be found again. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a golden glow over the tidy room. Emma moved quietly, preparing breakfast with a calm, almost careful rhythm. Her thoughts kept drifting back to last night, the way Ryan had spoken to her, the warmth in his voice, and the subtle way he had made her feel seen. She couldn't deny that something had shifted inside her, a subtle stirring that she hadn't expected. She chose to wear the navy blue miniskirt again, pairing it with a soft cream sweater. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about feeling alive. Something about the skirt, something about the way it fit her. reminded her of the woman she had almost forgotten she could be: confident, elegant, and quietly radiant as she walked into the kitchen carrying a mug of coffee. Ryan emerged from the guest room, hair tousled from sleep and wearing a simple t-shirt. His expression softened when he saw her, but then his eyes widened ever so slightly. "You're wearing that again?" he said, his voice calm but edged with surprise. Emma smiled, a little self-conscious. "Yes, it makes me feel myself." Ryan hesitated, then nodded, his tone careful. "It looks really good on you, Aunt Emma. I mean it." Her cheeks warmed, though she quickly turned to set the coffee on the table. There was a moment of quiet between them, comfortable but heavy with unspoken words. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds, but the air seemed charged in a way Emma hadn't felt in a long time. She poured them both coffee and sat down. They ate breakfast slowly, talking about Ryan's plans for the day, his internship, and the errands he needed to run. But beneath the casual conversation, something lingered, in unspoken awareness that neither of them could quite name. Emma caught herself noticing the subtle changes in him, the way he had grown into himself, how his presence filled the room without trying. Ryan's gaze lingered for just a moment longer than usual, not inappropriately, but with a quiet admiration that left her momentarily unsettled. She looked down at her coffee cup, pretending to stir, feeling a flutter of emotions she didn't expect to feel with her nephew. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was more about recognition, about seeing someone truly notice her again after years of feeling invisible. Emma cleared her throat and tried to focus on the conversation. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, keeping her tone light. "Better than I expected," Ryan said. He hesitated, then added, "You seem different this morning." She looked up, startled by the observation. "Different? How?" "Brighter, I guess," he said, shrugging. "More." "You?" Emma smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. "Maybe it's just the skirt," she joked softly. Ryan laughed, but it was quiet, almost nervous. "No, it's more than that. You've got this energy. I didn't realize how much I missed seeing it." Emma felt a pang of emotion, a mixture of gratitude and surprise. His words weren't flattery, they were genuine. And in that moment, she realized she hadn't expected to feel noticed in such a simple, honest way. After breakfast, Ryan left for a few hours to run errands. Emma stayed behind, tidying the house, humming softly as she moved. The skirt, the sunlight, and the echo of his words made her feel unusually light, almost like she could breathe in a new way. She realized how much she had been hiding her own spirit, how cautious she had become with herself. When Ryan returned, he was carrying a small shopping bag. "Picked up a few things for the house," he said, placing it on the counter. Then he paused, noticing her again. His eyes softened, and for a moment, Emma felt an unexpected connection. A quiet recognition that neither needed words. "You look really nice," he said, and there was no hesitation in his voice this time, just sincerity. Emma laughed lightly, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "I already got told that this morning," she said, trying to keep the mood casual. He grinned. "Well, I think it's worth saying twice." The conversation flowed naturally after that, easy and light. They talked about movies, shared memories from Ryan's childhood, and laughed over small things that reminded them both of better times. Yet every so often, their words would falter, and the air would thicken with a quiet unspoken awareness and emotional tension that neither wanted to label but both could feel. As the afternoon wore on, Emma realized she hadn't felt this alive in years. It wasn't about romance. It was about being noticed, understood, and appreciated for who she was now. Not the woman she used to be, not the quiet observer, but the real her. The skirt had become more than clothing. It was a symbol of rediscovery. A reminder that she could still shine and still feel confidence without apology. Ryan, on his part, seemed equally aware of the shift. He caught himself glancing at her sometimes, not out of attraction, but out of admiration and recognition. He realized that the woman before him had always been remarkable, even when she doubted herself. And seeing her like this, alive, confident, Smiling made him appreciate her in a way he hadn't fully acknowledged before. By late afternoon, the house was quiet again. Emma sat on the couch reading a book, though she could barely focus. Her thoughts kept returning to Ryan's words, his gentle encouragement. The way he had reminded her that happiness and confidence were still within reach. She realized that something inside her had shifted. She felt lighter, more open, more willing to embrace life again. When Ryan came back from a short walk, he handed her a small note he had scribbled earlier. "I thought you might like this," he said softly. Emma unfolded it and read, "You're stronger than you know. Don't forget to live for yourself." She smiled, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Ryan. That means a lot." He shrugged, smiling. "I just wanted you to remember. You've done so much for everyone else. Maybe it's time someone does something for you." That simple statement carried a quiet weight. Emma felt her eyes sting slightly, but she blinked it away. She didn't need to explain herself. He understood. And that understanding, that connection, was more powerful than anything else she had felt in years. As evening fell, Emma prepared a simple dinner. Ryan joined her and they ate together, the conversation easy and unforced. They laughed softly, shared stories, and sometimes paused just to enjoy the quiet comfort of being together. Emma realized that the shock she had felt earlier that morning the moment Ryan had noticed her skirt wasn't about embarrassment. It was about awakening a part of herself she had long forgotten. Later that night, as she got ready for bed, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The miniskirt from that morning had become more than just an outfit. It symbolized her courage, her rediscovered confidence, and the beginning of emotional renewal. She smiled, feeling a strange, peaceful satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive, not just in body, but in heart. When she slipped under the covers, she thought of Ryan's words and the gentle care in his actions. It wasn't romance, not yet, not exactly. It was something purer, something that reminded her she could still feel deeply, care openly, and embrace the warmth of human connection. And as sleep finally claimed her, Emma understood that the events of the morning, the unexpected surprise, the small shock, and the quiet acknowledgement of her own worth were only the beginning of a journey toward rediscovering herself, learning to embrace joy, and understanding that sometimes the people closest to you can awaken the parts of your heart you thought were long gone. That day had changed everything, quietly but profoundly. And Emma knew that tomorrow would bring more moments, more realizations, and more chances to feel alive again. The moment that shocked her hadn't been Ryan's gaze. It had been the realization that she had the power to feel beautiful, noticed, and alive once more, and that power had always been inside her. The following evening, Emma stood by her dressing table, brushing her hair slowly as the city lights twinkled through the window. The soft glow of her bedroom lamp reflected on the mirror, highlighting the gentle curves of her face and the warmth in her eyes. She had worn the navy blue miniskirt again, paired with a delicate blouse that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. For weeks, she had been rediscovering herself. But tonight felt different, electric, in a quiet, intimate way. Ryan knocked softly at the door before she left. "Come in," she called, straightening her posture. He stepped inside, holding a small silver bracelet. "I found this when I unpacked," he said quietly. "You gave it to me years ago when I graduated. I thought maybe you should have it back." Emma held the bracelet in her hand, the familiar weight bringing a wave of memories, graduation days, proud smiles, and long talks they had shared. She looked up at him, touched by the gesture. "Keep it," she said softly, shaking her head. "It suits you more now." Ryan hesitated, then smiled, leaving the bracelet on the dresser. There was a long pause filled with an unspoken understanding, a gentle acknowledgement of the bond that had grown stronger over the past few days. They didn't need words to express what had changed between them. It was clear in the way they looked at each other, warm and respectful, yet intimate in the simplest sense. Emma felt a flutter in her chest. She hadn't felt in years, not romantic in the forbidden sense, but profound and tender. It was a feeling that reminded her she was still alive, still capable of emotion, still capable of connection. The quiet moments with Ryan had brought her back to herself, back to the woman who could laugh freely, care openly, and embrace the simple joys of life. "I should probably go," she said after a moment, picking up her purse. She smiled at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a newfound strength. Ryan nodded. "Go enjoy yourself. You deserve it." The drive to dinner was quiet but comforting. The city felt alive, bathed in the glow of streetlights and evening traffic. Emma's thoughts kept returning to Ryan, his gentle encouragement, his thoughtful words, the quiet way he reminded her of her own worth. She realized the shock she had felt earlier that week, the moment he noticed her skirt, hadn't been embarrassment. It had been a revelation, a reminder that she could still feel noticed and appreciated, and that being confident in herself didn't require anyone's permission at the restaurant. Emma was greeted by friends, their laughter and excitement surrounding her. She smiled, engaged in conversation, and felt the lightness of social interaction again. Yet throughout the evening, her mind wandered back to the quiet moments at home, to Ryan's presence, and the way he had helped her remember that happiness could still exist, even after years of routine and solitude. When she returned home late that night, the house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the wall clock. She found Ryan sitting in the living room, reading under the warm glow of a lamp. He looked up and smiled. "You're back," he said simply. Emma set down her coat and purse. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft. "Dinner was lovely, but I couldn't stop thinking about the house, about you, about everything." Ryan's expression softened. "I get it. It's strange how home can feel different when someone's presence changes it, isn't it?" Emma nodded. She sat beside him, their shoulders brushing lightly. "You've changed it in ways I didn't expect," she said. "You reminded me that life doesn't have to be quiet, that I can still feel alive." They sat in comfortable silence, sharing a quiet warmth that was deeper than friendship, yet not defined by romance. It was a connection built on understanding, respect, and the tender awakening of emotions that had been dormant for far too long later. Emma found herself in her bedroom, looking at her reflection in the mirror once more. The miniskirt, the soft blouse, the gentle glow of the room, they all reminded her of the transformation happening within her. She realized she had spent so many years dimming her own light, hiding behind routine and caution, that she had almost forgotten the power of self-confidence, of self-love. Ryan knocked again, this time holding a small note. "I thought you might like this," he said, placing it gently on the